Queen sat alone on her throne, staring at the stars through the great window of her palace. The window stretched from floor to ceiling, and through it she could see 1,000 distant suns. She ruled 12 star systems. She commanded the largest fleet in the known galaxy, but none of that mattered to her tonight. Tonight, like every night for the past 7 cycles, she thought only of her daughter. Princess had been missing for 7 long cycles. In human years, that was nearly 10 of their years. The Queen remembered the day her youngest daughter had left for a simple diplomatic mission to the Outer Rim. It was supposed to be safe. It was supposed to be routine. But ship had vanished near that strange blue planet the Galactic Council called Earth. The Council had warned everyone to stay away from Earth. The humans who lived there were young and violent. They fought wars among themselves. They had barely discovered space travel. The Council believed it was best to leave them alone until they grew up as a species. But shuttle had crashed somewhere on that dangerous world, and no one knew what had happened to her. Search parties found nothing. The royal investigators found nothing. After 2 cycles, the council declared Princess dead. Queen held a funeral, but she never truly believed her daughter was gone. A mother knows these things. She could feel it in her heart that was still alive somewhere out there among the stars. The Queen was tall and elegant, with deep purple skin and 4 graceful arms. Her eyes were large and violet, and they saw everything. She had ruled the empire for 300 cycles, and in all that time she had never felt so powerless as she did now. She would have traded all her power, all her wealth, all her worlds, just to see her daughter one more time. A soft chime broke the silence. One of her guards appeared at the door, his face troubled. "My queen," he said, bowing low, "our sensors have detected an unauthorized vessel entering space." The Queen rose from her throne. Unauthorized vessels were common enough. Pirates, smugglers, lost traders. Her fleet dealt with them every day, but something in the guard's voice made her pause. "There is more," she said. It was not a question. The guard nodded slowly. "The vessel is transmitting an old transponder code, one that has been inactive for 7 cycles." He hesitated. "It is the code of Princess' personal shuttle." Queen felt her heart stop. For a moment she could not breathe. Then she straightened her spine and lifted her chin. She was a queen. She would not show weakness, not even now. "Bring the vessel to the palace courtyard," she commanded, "and summon the royal guard. If this is some trick, some cruel joke, I want those responsible brought before me in chains." The shuttle landed an hour later. Queen stood in the courtyard, surrounded by 50 of her best warriors. The evening sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. The shuttle was old and battered, its hull by time and hard travel, but the Queen recognized it instantly. She had given that shuttle to on her 100th birthday. The doors opened slowly. The Queen held her breath. A figure stepped out into the light. She was tall and slender, with purple skin and violet eyes. She wore simple human clothing, a blue jacket and pants made of some rough fabric. Her hair was longer than before, and there were new lines around her eyes, but there was no doubt. It was "Mother," the princess said softly. Queen wanted to run to her daughter. She wanted to hold her and never let go. But before she could move, another figure appeared in the doorway of the shuttle. It was a male, a human male. He was tall for his species, with broad shoulders and kind brown eyes. His hair was the color of dark wood, and his skin was a warm tan from years under a yellow sun. He moved carefully, almost protectively, and the Queen soon saw why. In his arms he carried a child. The little girl was perhaps 3 or 4 cycles old, with soft lavender skin that was lighter than any the Queen had ever seen. She had her mother's violet eyes, but they were warmer somehow, filled with a curious light. And when she smiled, she had her father's smile, wide and open and completely without fear. Queen stared at the child. She looked at her daughter, then at the human male, then back at the child. Her mind struggled to understand what her eyes were telling her. "Mother," said, stepping forward, "This is Jake Collins, he is my husband." She paused and took a deep breath. "And this is our daughter, her name is Lily." The courtyard was completely silent. The guards did not move. The wind did not blow. Even the birds in the palace garden seemed to hold their breath. Queen descended the steps of her throne platform slowly. Her long robes trailed behind her. She stopped in front of the human male, this Jake Collins, and looked at the child in his arms. The little girl looked back at her with those beautiful violet eyes. She did not seem afraid. Instead, she reached out one small hand toward the queen. "Hello," the child said in perfect. "Are you my grandma?" Something broke inside Queen. All the pain of the past 7 cycles, all the grief, all the loneliness, it all came rushing out. Tears fell from her eyes for the first time in centuries. She reached out with trembling hands and touched the child's face. The skin was soft and warm. Real. This was real. "Is this my granddaughter?" she whispered, her voice cracking. Moved closer, tears streaming down her own face. "Yes, mother, this is your granddaughter, and we have come home." Queen looked at the human male. He stood quietly, holding the child with obvious love and care. He did not bow or kneel. He simply met her gaze steadily without fear or arrogance. There was something in his eyes that she did not expect. Kindness, warmth, love. "You saved my daughter," the queen said. Jake nodded slowly. "I found her, Your Majesty. Her shuttle crashed in the mountains near my home. She was badly hurt." He looked at with such tenderness that even the queen could feel it. "I took care of her, and somewhere along the way I fell in love with her." The queen turned to her daughter. "You could have come home, you could have sent word. Why did you stay away for so long?" Took Jake's hand in her own. "Because I was afraid, mother, afraid of how you would react, afraid of what the council would say, afraid that you would take Jake away from me or take Lily away from us both." She squeezed her husband's hand. "But Lily deserves to know her grandmother. And I missed you, mother. I missed you so much." Queen stood in silence for a long moment. Then slowly she opened her arms. Fell into her mother's embrace, sobbing. Jake stepped closer, and little Lily reached out to wrap her small arms around both of them. For the first time in 7 cycles, Queen felt whole again. But she knew, even as she held her family close, that the hard part was just beginning. The council would not accept this. Lord and his allies would demand blood. A human in the royal family was unthinkable. A hybrid child as heir to the throne was impossible. The queen looked at her granddaughter's innocent face and made a silent promise. She did not know how, but she would protect this family, no matter what it cost her. The sun set over the palace and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there was Earth, that strange blue world where her daughter had found love. Queen had spent her whole life thinking humans were primitive and weak. But looking at Jake Collins, holding her granddaughter in her arms, she began to wonder if perhaps the galaxy had underestimated them. The news spread through the empire like fire through dry grass. Princess had returned. She had married a human. She had brought a hybrid child into the royal bloodline. By morning, every corner of the 12 star systems was talking about nothing else. The High Council demanded an immediate meeting. Queen had expected this. She had spent the night preparing, but she knew there was no way to make the council accept what had happened. The people were proud. They believed themselves to be the greatest species in the galaxy. The idea of mixing their blood with humans, creatures they considered barely more than clever animals, was deeply offensive to many of them. The council chamber was a vast circular room with seats rising in tiers around a central platform. 12 lords and ladies sat in judgment, representing the 12 systems of the empire. At their head sat Lord, the Queen's chief advisor and the most powerful noble in the realm. Lord was old, even by standards. His purple skin had faded to a dull gray, and his 4 arms were thin and bony. But his eyes were sharp and his mind was sharper still. He had served 3 queens before and he believed deeply in the old ways. To him, tradition was everything. Change was weakness. Jake stood in the center of the chamber, alone. The queen had wanted to stand with him, but tradition demanded that the accused face the council by himself, watch from a balcony above, holding Lily in her arms. Her face was pale with fear. "Jake Collins of Earth," Lord began, his voice cold and formal. "You stand accused of crimes against the Empire. You have taken a princess of the royal blood as your mate without permission. You have produced a hybrid offspring, polluting the sacred bloodline that has ruled our people for 10,000 cycles. How do you answer these charges?" Jake looked around the chamber. He was surrounded by aliens who saw him as less than nothing. Warriors twice his size stood ready to kill him at a single word. Any normal person would have been terrified. But Jake Collins was not a normal person. "I answer that I love with all my heart," he said, his voice calm and steady. "I answer that our daughter Lily is the greatest blessing of my life. And I answer that I would do it all again, without hesitation, because that is what love means." The council murmured in surprise. They had expected the human to beg for mercy. They had expected him to grovel and plead. This quiet confidence was something they did not understand. Lord leaned forward. "Love," he repeated, making the word sound like something dirty. "Humans and their foolish emotions. Do you truly believe that love gives you the right to defile our royal family?" "I believe that love gives me the right to stand here and face whatever judgment you decide," Jake replied. "I will not apologize for loving. I will not apologize for our daughter. If that is a crime in your eyes, then I am guilty." Lady, one of the younger council members, spoke up. "Tell us how this happened. How did you come to meet the princess?" Jake nodded and began his story. He spoke simply and honestly, without trying to make himself sound like a hero. He told them about his life on Earth. He was a pilot who flew small planes over the mountains of Montana. He lived alone in a cabin in the wilderness, far from the busy cities. He liked the quiet and the open sky. He told them about the night he saw a strange light fall from the heavens and crash into the mountains near his home. He told them how he had hiked through the snow to find the crash site. He had expected to find a meteor or perhaps a piece of space debris. Instead, he found a ship unlike anything he had ever seen. And inside the ship, badly injured and barely alive, he found. "I did not know what she was," Jake said. "I had never seen an alien before, but I knew she was hurt and needed help. So I carried her back to my cabin. It took me 3 hours through the snow. She was heavier than she looked." A few council members smiled at that, despite themselves. Jake continued. He told them how he had nursed back to health over many months. Her injuries were severe and her biology was completely foreign to him. He made many mistakes. He tried treatments that did not work, but he never gave up. "She could not speak my language at first," he said, "and I could not speak hers, but we found ways to communicate, pictures, gestures, simple words. Over time, we learned to understand each other, and over time, we became friends." He told them how the friendship grew into something more, how he fell in love with her kindness, her intelligence, her courage, how she taught him about the stars and the worlds beyond Earth, how he taught her about his world, about mountains and rivers, about snow and sunshine, about pancakes and coffee and music. "When she was finally healed, I offered to help her repair her ship," Jake said. "I wanted her to go home if that was what she wanted, but she asked me a question instead. She asked me if I wanted her to stay." He looked up at in the balcony. Their eyes met. "I said yes," he said simply, "and we have been together ever since." The chamber was quiet. Even Lord seemed moved by the story, though he tried not to show it. Then he hardened his heart and spoke again. "A touching tale, but it changes nothing. You are a human. You are not fit to be part of the royal family. The child is an abomination that should never have been created." Jake's eyes flashed with sudden anger. "Do not speak about my daughter that way." Lord stood, his 4 arms spreading wide. "Or what human? What will you do? You are weak. Your species is weak. You live for barely 100 cycles and then you die. You have no claws, no armor, no natural weapons of any kind. You are prey animals who somehow learn to walk upright. We are more than that, Jake said quietly. You are nothing, Lord shouted. I demand that this human be executed for his crimes against the Empire, and I demand that the hybrid child be taken away and raised far from the royal court, where it cannot contaminate the throne. Queen rose to her feet. You go too far, Lord. I speak only the truth, my queen. This is what must be done. This is what tradition demands. The council members nodded in agreement. The queen could see that most of them agreed with. They were afraid of change. They were afraid of what this human and his child might mean for their way of life. Jake looked at the council, then at Lord. His face was calm, but there was steel in his eyes. I challenge you, he said. The chamber fell silent. What did you say? Lord whispered. I challenge you to single combat, Jake repeated. Under the ancient laws of the people, you have accused me. I have the right to defend myself with my body as well as my words. Lord laughed. It was a cruel, mocking sound. You challenge me. I have fought in 100 battles. I have killed warriors twice your size. You would not last 10 heartbeats against me. Then you have nothing to fear, Jake said. Accept my challenge. If you win, you can do whatever you want with me. But if I win, you will withdraw your demands and accept my family into the Empire. The council members looked at each other in disbelief. This was madness. No human could defeat a warrior. It was impossible. But the ancient laws were clear. If a challenge was issued, it had to be answered. Lord smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Very well, human. I accept your challenge. We will fight at dawn tomorrow. And when I kill you, I will make sure your daughter watches. Jake did not flinch. I will see you at dawn. Queen watched the human walk out of the council chamber. He moved like a man who had already accepted his own death. But there was something else in his walk, something she could not quite identify. It looked almost like hope. That night came to Jake's chamber with tears in her eyes. You cannot do this, she begged. We'll kill you. Please, there must be another way. Jake took her hands in his. There is no other way. If I run, they will hunt us forever. If I hide, they will take Lily from us. This is the only chance we have. But you are human. He is. You cannot win. Jake smiled gently. Maybe not, but I have to try for you, for Lily, for our family. He pulled her close. Where I come from, we do not give up just because the odds are against us. We fight. We struggle. We survive. That is what it means to be human. Looked into his eyes. She saw no fear there, only love and a fierce determination that burned brighter than any star. I love you, she whispered. I love you too, he replied. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. Outside the window, the stars wheeled slowly across the sky. Somewhere among them was Earth, the small blue world where Jake had been born. He thought about his cabin in the mountains, about the cold, clean air and the endless sky. He wondered if he would ever see them again. Then he closed his eyes and prepared himself for the battle to come. The arena was ancient. It had been built 10,000 cycles ago in the earliest days of the Empire. The stones were worn smooth by time, and the walls still bore the marks of countless battles. This was where warriors proved their worth. This was where disputes were settled with blood. Jake stood at one end of the arena, dressed in simple clothes. He had refused the armor the guards had offered him. It would only slow him down, he said. He carried no weapon. Under the old laws, the challenger could choose to fight with bare hands if he wished. Lord stood at the other end, wrapped in ceremonial battle robes. In his 4 hands he held traditional blades, curved swords with edges sharp enough to cut through steel. He looked at Jake with contempt. This would be over quickly. The stands around the arena were packed with spectators. Word of the challenge had spread across the Empire, and thousands had come to watch. Most of them expected to see a human die. Some had even placed bets on how quickly Lord would kill him. Queen sat in the royal box, her face a mask of stone. Inside, her hearts were breaking. She had grown to respect this human in the short time she had known him. She did not want to watch him die. Sat beside her mother, holding Lily in her lap. The little girl did not fully understand what was happening. She only knew that her father was going to fight, and that everyone seemed very worried about it. "Why is Daddy fighting the angry man?" Lily asked. Hugged her daughter tight. "Because Daddy loves us very much, and sometimes when you love someone you have to fight for them." Lily nodded seriously. "Daddy is very brave." "Yes," whispered her voice breaking, "he is." The morning sun rose over the arena walls, painting everything in shades of gold and pink. A horn sounded, deep and mournful. The battle was about to begin. Lord walked forward, his 4 blades dancing in his hands. He moved with the confidence of a warrior who had never lost. "Any last words, human?" Jake rolled his shoulders and stretched his neck. "Yeah, try not to trip over those fancy robes." The crowd gasped at his disrespect. Lord's eyes narrowed with fury. Then he attacked. The Lord moved faster than seemed possible. His blades cut through the air in deadly arcs, each one aimed at a vital point. Jake barely managed to dodge the first strike. The second one caught his arm, drawing a line of red across his skin. He dove to the side, rolled, and came up running. He had no intention of standing still and letting cut him to pieces. His only chance was to keep moving, to stay alive long enough to find an opening. But was relentless. He pressed his attack, his 4 arms working independently, creating a wall of sharp steel. Jake dodged and weaved, but he could not avoid every blow. A blade sliced across his back. Another cut his leg. Blood dripped onto the ancient stones. The crowd began to cheer. This was what they had expected. The human was being torn apart. Jake stumbled and fell. Lord stood over him, grinning with triumph. "Pathetic. I expected more from the creature that stole our princess, but you are just like all humans, weak, fragile, nothing." He raised his blades for the killing blow. But Jake was not finished. He swept his leg out, catching behind the knee. The Lord stumbled, surprised by the sudden move. Jake used that moment to roll away and get back to his feet. "We are not nothing," Jake said, breathing hard. "We are human, and we do not give up." Snarled and attacked again. This time Jake was ready. He ducked under the first swing, blocked the second with his forearm, gritting his teeth against the pain as the blade cut into his flesh, and drove his fist into his stomach. The blow barely made the flinch, but it made a point. The human could fight back. The battle continued. Minutes stretched into hours. The sun climbed higher in the sky. The crowd grew silent as they watched something they had never seen before. The human refused to die. Every time he fell, he got back up. Every time he was cut, he kept fighting. His body was covered in wounds, his clothes soaked with blood, but still he stood. Still he moved. Still he fought. Lord was growing tired. They were strong, but they were built for quick, decisive battles. They did not have the endurance for long fights. Their bodies burned energy too fast. His movements were slowing. His breathing was heavy. Sweat poured down his face. Jake saw his chance. He charged forward, ignoring the blade that sliced across his chest. He tackled around the waist, driving him backward. The Lord fell, and Jake fell with him. They crashed to the ground in a tangle of limbs. Tried to bring his blades around, but Jake was too close. At this distance, the long swords were useless. Jake drove his elbow into his throat, then his fist into his face. Again, and again, and again. The Lord tried to throw him off, but his strength was fading. He had never fought anyone like this before. No one would ever fight with such wild desperation. It was uncivilized. It was brutal. It was human. With a final desperate heave, managed to push Jake away. But he could not get up. He lay on his back, gasping for air, his 4 arms spread wide. His blades had fallen from his grip. He was beaten. Jake stood over him, swaying on his feet. He was barely conscious. Blood dripped from a dozen wounds. Every breath was agony, but he was still standing. The crowd was completely silent. No one could believe what they had just witnessed. Jake looked down at Lord. The old Lord stared back at him with something new in his eyes. It was not hatred or contempt. It was respect, and perhaps a little fear. Under the old laws, Jake had the right to kill his opponent. One strike to the throat would end Lord's life and secure his victory. It was what any would do. But Jake was not. Instead of striking, he reached down and offered his hand. "It is over," he said quietly. "There has been enough blood today." Lord stared at the offered hand. No one had ever shown him mercy before. It was not the way. For a long moment he did not move. Then slowly, he reached up and took Jake's hand. Jake pulled him to his feet. The two men stood facing each other, both battered and bloody. Lord looked into the human's eyes and saw something there that he had never seen before, something that frightened him more than any weapon. It was compassion. "You have won," said, his voice hoarse. "I withdraw my demands. Your family will be safe." The crowd erupted. Some cheered, some wept, some simply sat in stunned silence. The world they knew had just changed forever. Ran down from the stands, carrying Lily in her arms. She threw herself at Jake, sobbing with relief. He caught her and held her close, ignoring the pain of his wounds. "You did it," she cried. "You did it." "I told you," he whispered. "Humans do not give up." Queen descended from the royal box and approached the little family. She looked at Jake with new eyes. This man had just done the impossible. He had defeated a warrior through nothing but courage and determination. "Why did you spare him?" she asked. "You had every right to take his life." Jake looked at her with those tired, kind brown eyes. "Because killing him would not have proved anything. I did not fight to destroy your people, your majesty. I fought to protect my family. There is a difference." The queen nodded slowly. She was beginning to understand something about humans that the rest of the galaxy had missed. They were not weak because they were fragile. They were strong because they loved so fiercely. They fought not for glory or conquest, but for each other. "Take him to the healers," she commanded, "and treat him as you would treat any member of the royal family, because that is what he is now." As the guards carried Jake away, little Lily looked up at her father with shining eyes. "Daddy, you were so brave. Does it hurt very much?" Jake smiled down at her, his face pale with pain and exhaustion. "Yes, sweetheart, it hurts a lot, but it was worth it." "Why?" she asked. He reached out and touched her cheek with a bloody hand. "Because I love you, and love is always worth fighting for." The sun climbed high over the arena, and the crowd slowly began to leave. They had come to watch a human die. Instead, they had witnessed the birth of a legend. The story of Jake Collins, the human who refused to fall, would be told throughout the Empire for generations to come. The weeks that followed the duel were strange and wonderful. Jake healed slowly in the Royal Medical Wing, tended by the best physicians in the Empire. His body was covered in scars, and some of the wounds would never fully heal. But he was alive, and that was all that mattered. Stayed by his side constantly, holding his hand while he slept and reading to him when he was awake. Little Lily visited every day, bringing him drawings she had made and telling him stories about her adventures in the palace. But the most unexpected visitor was Queen herself. At first, she came only to check on her son-in-law's recovery. It was a formal duty, nothing more. But she found herself staying longer each time. There was something about Jake that drew her in. He was different from anyone she had ever known. One day, she found him sitting up in bed, teaching Lily how to fold paper into shapes. Earth origami, he called it. He had made a small bird that could flap its wings when you pulled its tail. "Where did you learn this?" the queen asked, watching with curiosity. "My mother taught me," Jake said. "When I was small, she would make these for me whenever I was sick or sad. She said that creating something beautiful was the best medicine." Queen sat down beside the bed. "Tell me about your mother." So Jake told her. He spoke of a woman named Grace Collins, who had raised him alone on a small farm in Montana. She had worked hard every day of her life, growing vegetables and keeping chickens and fixing everything that broke. She had taught Jake to be kind, to be honest, and to never give up no matter how hard things got. "She sounds like a remarkable woman," the Queen said. "She was," Jake agreed. "She passed away 5 years ago, but I think she would have liked, and I know she would have loved Lily." The Queen looked at her granddaughter, who was carefully folding her own paper bird. The child's small fingers struggled with the complicated folds, but she did not give up. She kept trying until she got it right. "She has your determination," the Queen said quietly. Jake smiled. "She has her mother's heart, that is what matters." As the days passed, Queen found herself spending more and more time with her new family. She watched Jake cook strange human food in the palace kitchen, teaching the confused cooks how to make pancakes and fried eggs. She listened as he explained the rules of something called baseball to a group of fascinated guards. She saw him fix a broken fountain in the garden using nothing but simple tools and clever thinking. But most of all, she watched him with Lily. Jake was a natural father. He had endless patience for his daughter's questions, even when they made no sense. He played with her for hours, chasing her through the palace halls and lifting her high in the air until she shrieked with laughter. He read her stories before bed, making up funny voices for all the characters. And when she had nightmares, he would hold her close and sing soft songs until she fell asleep again. "The bond between human parents and their children is very strong," the Queen observed one evening. Jake looked at her with those warm brown eyes. "Is it different for your people?" The Queen considered the question. "Children are raised by the community, not just the parents. We believe it makes them stronger and more independent, but sometimes I wonder if something is lost in that approach." She thought of who had always been different from her siblings. The princess had always craved more affection, more attention, more love. Perhaps that was why she had been so drawn to this human who loved so openly and completely. "Humans love differently than we do," the Queen admitted. "I am beginning to think that perhaps your way is not worse than ours, just different." It was the closest she had come to accepting Jake as a true member of the family. But the real change came a month later, when the Queen fell ill. It started as a simple fever. The royal physicians were not concerned at first, but the fever grew worse, and soon Queen was confined to her bed, too weak to stand. The doctors worked through the night, but nothing they tried seemed to help. "It is the wasting sickness," the head physician finally admitted. "The same disease that killed your mother. There is no cure. We can only try to keep her comfortable." Wept at the news. Lord and the other council members began to discuss succession. The palace fell into mourning. But Jake refused to accept it. He went to the Queen's chambers and sat by her bedside. She was pale and weak, her purple skin faded to a sickly gray. Her 4 arms lay limp at her sides. "You should not be here," she whispered. "This sickness may be contagious." "I do not care," Jake said. He took her hand in his. "You are family, and family takes care of each other." He stayed by her side for 3 days and 3 nights. He did not sleep. He barely ate. He spent every moment caring for the Queen, doing things the physicians had never thought to try. He kept her room cool and dark. He made her drink small sips of water every hour. He placed cold cloths on her forehead to bring down the fever. He talked to her constantly, telling her stories about Earth, about his childhood, about all the adventures he and had shared. "Why are you doing this?" the Queen asked on the second night. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I treated you with suspicion when you first arrived. I let threaten you and your daughter. I did nothing to help you." Jake squeezed her hand gently. "You are mother. You are Lily's grandmother. That makes you my family too. And where I come from, we do not abandon family no matter what." On the third day, the fever broke. The physicians could not explain it. The wasting sickness was always fatal. No one had ever survived it before, but somehow the queen was getting better. Color returned to her skin. Strength returned to her limbs. Within a week, she was sitting up in bed. Within 2 weeks, she was walking again. It was the human, the head physician told the court in amazement. His methods were primitive but effective. He simply refused to let her die. Queen summoned Jake to her chamber as soon as she was well enough to receive visitors. He came with and Lily, all three of them looking tired but happy. "You saved my life," the queen said. "The doctors say I should be dead, but you would not let me go." Jake shrugged, embarrassed by the attention. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," the queen said firmly. "That is not true. Most people would have given up. The physicians gave up. The council gave up. Even I gave up. But you did not. You fought for me just as you fought in the arena. You refused to accept defeat." She reached out and took his hand in both of hers. "I have lived for over 300 cycles. I have ruled an empire. I have seen wars and peace, triumph and tragedy. But I have never known anyone like you, Jake Collins. You have shown me what it truly means to be strong." Jake did not know what to say, so he simply smiled and squeezed her hand back. Lily climbed onto the bed and hugged her grandmother carefully. "I am glad you are not sick anymore, Grandma. I made you a paper bird. Daddy showed me how." She held up a slightly crooked paper crane. One wing was bigger than the other, and the folds were messy, but it was made with love. Queen took the paper bird and held it like it was the most precious treasure in the universe. "It is beautiful, little one. I will keep it forever." That night the queen stood at her window and looked out at the stars. She thought about all the things she had believed about humans. She had thought they were primitive, weak, and unworthy of respect. She had been wrong about all of it. Jake Collins had shown her that strength was not about having 4 arms or living for hundreds of cycles. True strength came from the heart. It came from loving fiercely and fighting for what mattered. It came from never giving up, even when all hope seemed lost. She looked down at the paper crane in her hands. Such a simple thing, just folded paper, but it represented something much greater. It represented hope. It represented change. It represented the future. Queen smiled. For the first time in decades, she was excited to see what tomorrow would bring. The great hall of the palace was filled to bursting. Nobles from all 12 star systems had gathered at the queen's command. Generals stood beside merchants. Scientists mingled with artists. Even Lord was there, standing quietly at the back of the crowd. His face still bore the marks of his battle with Jake, but his eyes held no anger. Something had changed in the old warrior since that day in the arena. Queen sat upon her throne, looking out at her people. She wore the ancient crown of her ancestors, a circle of silver and starlight that had been passed down through 50 generations. Today, she would make an announcement that would change the course of history. Jake stood beside at the foot of the throne, holding Lily in his arms. The little girl wore a small dress that matched her mother's gown. She looked around at the vast crowd with wide, curious eyes, not afraid at all. "My people," the queen began, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "For 10,000 cycles, the empire has stood as a beacon of strength in the galaxy. We have conquered worlds. We have defeated enemies. We have built wonders that other species can only dream of." The crowd murmured in agreement. They were proud of their history, proud of their power. "But in all that time," the queen continued, "we have also made mistakes. We have looked down upon other species. We have believed ourselves to be superior to all others. We have closed our hearts to anything different from ourselves." The murmuring grew louder. Some of the nobles looked uncomfortable. 7 cycles ago, my daughter disappeared. I believed I had lost her forever, but she returned to me, bringing with her a gift I never expected. She brought me a son-in-law who showed me what true courage looks like, and she brought me a granddaughter who has filled my life with joy. She looked down at Jake and Lily with genuine warmth in her eyes. Many of you questioned this union. Some of you condemned it. You believed that humans were too primitive, too weak, too different to be accepted among us. I understand those fears. I shared them myself. The queen stood from her throne and descended the steps until she stood before Jake. He met her gaze steadily, showing no fear. "But I was wrong," she said. "We were all wrong." A shocked silence fell over the hall. A queen admitting she was wrong was almost unheard of. Jake Collins is not weak. He defeated Lord in single combat, not through superior strength, but through determination and will. He saved my life when I was dying, not through advanced medicine, but through compassion and care. He has loved my daughter and my granddaughter with a devotion that puts many to shame. She turned back to face the crowd. Humans are not primitive. They are different. They do not live as long as we do, so they love more intensely. They are not as strong as we are, so they fight more cleverly. They do not have our technology, so they solve problems with creativity and heart. She raised her voice so that everyone could hear. I have learned more about strength from this one human than I learned in 300 cycles of ruling an empire, and today I intend to honor him properly. The queen took Jake's hand and led him up the steps to stand beside her throne. The crowd gasped. No one who was not of royal blood had ever stood in that place. "Jake Collins," she announced, "I name you Prince Consort of the Empire. You shall be given all the rights and privileges of the royal family. Your word shall carry the weight of law, and any who insult you shall answer to me personally." Jake bowed his head respectfully. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I will try to be worthy of this honor." "You already are," the queen said simply. She turned to look at Lily, still in her father's arms. The child was watching everything with that bright, curious look that reminded the queen so much of at that age. "And as for my granddaughter," the queen continued, "Lily Collins, daughter of and Jake, shall be named heir to the throne after her mother. One day this child of two worlds shall rule the empire." The crowd erupted in shocked whispers. A hybrid child on the throne, it was unprecedented, it was scandalous, it was terrifying. Lord stepped forward. The crowd fell silent, expecting him to object. He had been the loudest voice against the humans. He had nearly killed Jake in the arena. Surely he would not accept this. But the old warrior surprised everyone. "I have fought beside queens and against them," Lord said, his voice rough but clear. "I have seen the rise and fall of dynasties, and I tell you now that this human has more honor than many I have known." He walked to where Jake stood and knelt before him. "I was wrong about you. I was wrong about your people. I ask your forgiveness." Jake reached down and lifted the old warrior to his feet. "There is nothing to forgive. You were protecting your people. I understand that." Lord nodded slowly. "Then I pledge myself to your family. Let any who threaten you face my blades." One by one, other nobles began to step forward. Some still looked uncertain, but none dared to oppose the queen openly. And many, looking at Jake and Lily, found their hearts softening despite themselves. Finally, the queen made her last announcement. "There is one more matter. The world called Earth has been isolated for too long. The Galactic Council declared them too dangerous to contact, but I believe this was a mistake. Earth shall be offered protected status under the Empire. We shall send ambassadors to open relations with their people, and in time, I hope, they will join the galactic community as equals." She looked at Jake. "Your world gave me my daughter back. It gave me a son I never knew I needed and a granddaughter I love more than words can say. This is my way of thanking them." Jake felt tears prick at his eyes. He thought of his home, his little cabin in the mountains, the vast starry skies of Montana. Soon, his people would know they were not alone in the universe. They would learn of the wonders that waited among the stars. It was almost too much to comprehend. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for everything." The ceremony ended as the sun began to set outside the great windows. The sky blazed with colors that had no names in any Earth language. Shades of gold and rose and violet painted the clouds as the twin moons began to rise. Later that evening, the royal family gathered on a balcony overlooking the palace gardens. Queen, Jake, and little Lily sat together, watching the stars appear one by one. "Grandma," Lily said, tugging at the Queen's sleeve, "can Daddy make pancakes for the whole empire?" Everyone laughed. Jake had introduced the palace cooks to human breakfast foods, and now half the court was obsessed with pancakes, bacon, and something called maple syrup. Queen smiled down at her granddaughter. "Perhaps not the whole empire, little one, but I am sure he can make them for us whenever you want." Lily nodded seriously. "Good, because I think pancakes make everyone happy." "She is not wrong," Jake said, pulling his daughter onto his lap. "Pancakes have a way of bringing people together." Leaned against her husband's shoulder, feeling a peace she had never known before. For 7 years she had been afraid to come home, afraid of what her mother would say, afraid of losing the family she had built. But now, looking at her mother laughing with her daughter, she knew that everything had worked out exactly as it should. "I love you," she whispered to Jake. "I love you too," he replied, kissing the top of her head. "Always and forever." Queen watched her family with a heart so full it almost hurt. She had ruled for 300 cycles. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had known joy and sorrow, triumph and defeat. But she had never felt as happy as she did right now. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders. There were strange worlds and stranger beings, mysteries beyond counting, and adventures waiting to be had. But the greatest wonder of all, she now understood, was the power of love to transform and heal. A human pilot from a backwater planet had changed everything. He had defeated warriors, healed sicknesses, and won hearts simply by being kind and brave and good. He had shown an entire empire that strength was not about power or dominance. True strength was about love. Little Lily pointed up at the sky. "Look, Grandma, that bright star. Is that where Earth is?" The Queen followed her gaze to a small yellow point of light near the horizon. "Yes, little one, that is your father's star. That is where he comes from." Lily smiled. "It is pretty. Maybe we can visit someday." "I would like that," Queen said. "I would like that very much." The night grew deeper and the stars blazed brighter. Somewhere out there, Earth waited, unaware that its fate had just changed forever. Somewhere out there, a new chapter was beginning. But here, on this balcony, a grandmother held her granddaughter and watched the stars with a heart full of hope. The old ways were ending. A new dawn was coming. And it all started with a simple question, asked by a frightened queen to a child with violet eyes and her father's smile. "Is this my granddaughter?" Yes, yes, she was, and she always would be.